right, everybody, welcome again to the Messy Middle. This is Anita and I am your host, and today I'm so excited. We've been getting to know my new best friend, Dr. Diane. Welcome to the show, Dr. Diane. Super excited to have you here. How about do a little bit of intro for yourself? Give us a little bit of your amazing background that you were just sharing with me, and then we'll get the conversation going.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much, Anita. It's an absolute pleasure to be on the show today. And yes, my name is Dr. Diane, as I've been introduced, and I trained initially as an optometrist in South Africa. Many years ago, I won't give away my age. Loved clinical practice for the first, I think, 4 years that I had practiced, but really felt a call towards public health and making a difference, not just in my community, but in my profession in areas of need I identified in South Africa and in other parts of the African continent were not being addressed. So I made a purposeful pivot out of clinical practice. In fact, I even took a 3-month sabbatical to really introspect and pray about what next steps were God ordained for me. And it's amazing how when we surrender those things to God, that He shows us the way and He goes before us. And God caused me to get connected with some very key strategic people in the global landscape of optometry, and things were starting to shift in terms of elevating optometry on the global stage and the need for uncorrected refractive error to be recognized as a public health problem globally. And so my work shifted in that direction, and I eventually pivoted into academia, where I took this message of being an advocate for unaddressed eye health needs globally to my students. I was then investing in the next generation of trainees. And throughout that 12-year career in academia, I was able to impact not just undergrad and postgrad students, but also the ethos of how we trained healthcare professionals in general. I did a 5-year postdoctoral fellowship in health professions education. And then after I moved to Canada in 2022, really felt that it was almost a culmination of my career journey, that I now was in a place to speak a message of we all have a purpose beyond our professional qualifications and beyond our clinical skills. And what is that purpose? What does God want you to do in the next phase of your career? And so I started my podcast, Life Beyond Clinical Practice, to really help healthcare professionals who felt stuck, who felt they had reached a plateau, who were no longer fulfilled in the work they were doing, knew they were called for more, but didn't know how to pivot. And that's really the work that I do now. I feel so blessed to be able to do this work and journey with people who are trying to find a purposeful path to making an impact in the world through their professional lives. So that's my career journey in summary, Anita.
Wow, that's so exciting. Isn't it so interesting, Diane? I think sometimes when we are younger, we think, oh, I'm gonna do this step and then this step, and then I don't know, or I don't know what I'm gonna do, anything like that. And yet, when you have a chance to like introspectively look back on your
Mhm.
journey and see the ebbs and the
The
flows and the right
nuances.
turns and the left turns, especially
Definitely.
yeah, especially with God in that mix. Everybody knows who listen to my audience, we're going to put life in the context and the framework of
Oh,
God. If you have a different framework, that's fine. This is what we're going to like. Is it
right.
okay always if I just be me and you be you and it's all good no matter what? But
Absolutely.
isn't it fabulous and fascinating when you look back and wow, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that left turn or that right turn, but look, it's almost but God, but look what God
Oh, for
did. Look what
sure.
God did in spite of that almost. Yeah.
Anita, if I can just add to that,
Yeah.
when I graduated with my bachelor's in optometry, I'm like, yes, I have a profession. This is the end of my study. It had been 5 years. I tossed out all my books and I said, never again. And it's God put me in places. And then I was able to get a fully funded master's degree. Never anticipated getting a master's degree. After the master's, I'm like, that's it, never again. And God gave me a fully funded doctoral scholarship.
Yeah.
And it's just like I saw his hand, and I didn't honestly see all the pieces coming together. But where I'm at now, I can see how all of that made sense and has prepared me for the work that I'm doing now. So it's just phenomenal when you surrender and you tuned into those nuances, as you say, the left turns and the right turns, and you obediently follow,
Yeah.
not necessarily knowing the clear path ahead of you. Okay, I see the hand of God here, and I'm going to move in that direction. And yeah, he's got a purpose beyond what we see.
Okay, Diane, I love what you're talking about. So let's dig in a little bit deeper, because don't we know that sometimes people outside of the faith, or sometimes if we don't have what's the word I'm looking for? Like the evidence file in our brain, or the evidence file externally to us of this is what it looks like to ask and then listen to God and then go where he's calling us to go,
Mm-hmm.
and just take that step by step. Let's talk about that journey a little bit, because don't we know sometimes like walking by faith, like it can be really challenging. Sometimes it doesn't make sense in the
Oh,
natural, doesn't make sense in our
absolutely.
checkbook. It doesn't make
Right.
right there. There are oftentimes these elements in our journey that don't necessarily make sense. And so I guess maybe the underlying question is, how do you discern? Is it God? Is it not God? Is it just me? Maybe let's dive into that a little bit more.
Sure. So I've two things. One, I've always said I follow the peace. Even if it's foreign to me, even if it wasn't part of my plan, if it feels uncomfortable, but I have a peace about it. It's
Yeah.
like uncomfortable because I know I'm stretching myself to the next level. And when I see that things just fall into place in front of me without any efforts on my part, I'm like,
Mm.
this is God opening the door. This is God laying the path before me. How much clearer can this get? I
Yeah.
didn't ask for this. People are coming and they're saying, we'll lay out the red carpet for you, just figuratively speaking.
Mhm.
I'm like, this is God leading me in a direction he wants me to go. Wasn't part of my plan. I recognize his hand and I'm going to move in that direction and trust that he's taken care of the details. And
Oh,
that's always how I've approached it.
that's
Uh,
so beautiful, because what you're talking about is trusting the Father, that his favor is all over your life. So, yeah, if you need to, anybody who's listening, rewind that 10 seconds and catch that again. Like what Dr. Diane is talking about is listening to the Father and then going forward where the piece is. What you did not say, and I actually love this, is you did not say that it wasn't void of I'm not really sure, or this is uncomfortable, because don't we know the word says like God's part of God's plan for us as his daughters and his son is that he wants to mature us. The maturity
oh,
comes through
for
the
sure.
trials. The
Right.
maturity comes through the trusting. The maturity comes like, God, I don't see all the 10 steps, but I do know
Mm-hmm.
I do know the next step. And I know sometimes that process of God's best for us in order to walk through the hard stuff and then be refined and
Oh,
matured
yes.
and improved. Not everybody wants to do that, can we say?
No, absolutely. And
Mhm.
I think also, Anita, when you do, you have your quiet times and you're
Mhm.
listening to the Holy Spirit, and God shows you sometimes just in little inklings, this is where I'm taking your life, or
Yeah.
this is the purpose I've placed in you. And it's always that for me is the compass, it's a yardstick. Is this aligned with that purpose? Is it aligned with what I feel maybe not right now ready to do in my life, but I know that in 10 years' time, this is the kind of work I want to do. And is it aligned with that? Okay, then this is God leading me in that direction. I'm moving to where He wants me to be. And like I said, it's not always comfortable because we as human beings, we like comfort. We like things that we can control and feel and touch and see the evidence, as you say. But
Yeah.
often that's not how God moves. He just wants you to have childlike faith to recognize that this is the next step that He's put before you and trust that He's taken care of the details.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this. Can you think about it too? Oh, this is going to be so good. When we get like the vision later, okay, God, I know that I've heard from you. I understand you've given this vision for me to be able to go and do the things. And then there comes some trials, there comes some resistance, there comes an opportunity for some growth, some maturity, some moving forward. Don't you find that as we walk in that, oh gosh, so I get the vision later,
Mm.
and then I actually have to do some steps to grow, to become more of who God has fashioned me to be, destined me to be. And yet, if I'm not willing to do that and I stay back, everything we've done in our life has taken us to this point. But sometimes, don't we know, we need to be stretched in order to go to that next level, and or we need to hire a coach to help us get beyond what we can
Right.
see on our own, like investment in ourselves and being able to have another person This is what I do in my business. I have actually several coaches that I've invested heavily with, because scripture says where my treasure is, there is my heart is. So when I
Right.
invest myself in the growth that it takes for someone or some persons to take me beyond where I can go on my own. Let's talk about that a little bit. That form of education can come in lots of different ways. I have a tendency to now, after having done a degree, I tend towards more in the coaching realm, because I know that in the entrepreneurial space, particularly, the university system doesn't really support what we need as entrepreneurs to go forward. And nothing against it. Higher education is totally amazing, but it's not necessarily the right training for the mindset of the entrepreneur. So there may be 2 or 3 questions under there, but sorry.
100%,
Talk to me.
Anita. 100%. I've come from the academic world. And in fact, that was my number one gripe, because we have all these curricula and structured programs, and it's like a one size fits all. And all of these students
Right.
must be in one box, and they must all accomplish the same learning outcomes. And I'm like, every individual is unique.
Yeah.
Each of them is purposefully designed differently, and we are not tapping into that. We are not nurturing it. So the work I do now is really actually part of that reflection of
Yeah.
my work as an academic, that somehow we are missing the mark.
Oh,
And formal education is not answering the need of individuals and the need of society. We're not getting the best out of students and graduates, because that's the missing piece. And this is why I believe in coaching,
yeah.
having a coach, having a guide, someone who's walked the journey, who's got the experience, as you so rightly said, can point out the things we often don't see ourselves, or we don't
Mhm.
want to see because
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So you need someone who's going to stretch you. You're not going to like it all of the time. You're going to feel like you want to bail ship, jump out sometimes and run in the opposite direction, but it's necessary in order to achieve next level growth.
Yeah.
So I 100%, I think that higher education, being a university professor myself, I can attest it has its place,
Yes.
not the end all and be all. We real life experience and mentorship and coaching is so incredibly valuable in uncovering an individual's full potential and helping to remove some of the scales from our eyes that we really sometimes just get so dulled by the routine of life and the mundane responsibilities that we don't even see the opportunities ahead of us sometimes.
Oh, I love that you use that word opportunity. Did you know that there's a study that came out? I think it came out in 2022 and then has been now updated. The industry that we're talking about, the coaching industry. So if somebody's hearing right now and they're thinking, I want to step into coaching, I have this life experience. I'll just throw this in as a side note. That industry in the next, like by 2030, is going to be in the $1 trillion range, like $2 trillion industry. The growth
Wow.
that is happening in personal coaching, consulting, entrepreneurship right now is it's increasing at such an, I was going to say a different word, such an amazing rate, that I know oftentimes when we step into it or we're in it, we can think, oh, there's not enough room for everybody, or there's not enough to go around. And yet that mindset is a lack mindset, a poverty mindset. If we look at
Mm-hmm.
scripture, like God's so often talking about, what are we thinking on? What are we focusing on? Where's my mind at? And yet
Mm-hmm.
when you look at it from an abundance standpoint and you start to hear some of those numbers, like multi-billion-dollar industry moving to $1 trillion industry, you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, there's more than enough for you. Let me just say this, especially in the high ticket spaces, where I focus in this, right? There's more than enough clients for high ticket clients for you, Dr. Diane. There's more than enough high ticket clients for me. And there's more than enough for everybody listening, with more than enough left over. There's actually so many buyers that are in the high ticket space, not lower. So the definition of high ticket space can be anything over 3K. Although for me and my business partner, we focus in 10K and above, but
Mm-hmm.
there's so many buyers that are looking for something different. Like
Right.
it's just so encouraging, because
Absolutely.
you start to hear this conversation and you can think, Dr. Diane has this experience, Anita has all this experience, 20 plus years in consulting myself and all that kind of stuff. And we can mistakenly think in our own minds, Oh, these ladies, man, they've
Mm,
got it dialed in. So
right.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. Mine comes back to purpose.
Oh, yeah.
When you understand that you were uniquely purposed to reach certain people, God
Mm,
has equipped you with your skills, your professional experience, your background. Every piece of the puzzle of your life was uniquely crafted, and your message is unique.
yeah.
You can be a coach, I can be a coach, there can be a million other coaches, but each of us have been handcrafted to reach certain people. God knows those people we are
Yeah.
meant to reach because our stories are unique, our
Mhm.
life experiences are unique, and the value we bring to the table is unique. So people may Anita better than they do Dr. Diane, just because I don't know, they like your personality
Yeah.
better or they can relate to you better. We've all got our lane to run. It's not a competition,
Yeah. Isn't that so
and
cool? Yeah. Jesus even
yeah,
says, my sheep will know my voice. Do you know that there's just for somebody listening right now that your sheep are waiting to hear your voice? Because Dr. Diane just said there's something about the way a person looks or the way they sound or the
yeah.
story that resonates with them,
Hmm.
right? Like I share my story. My husband going in about 2.5 years ago, went in for an outpatient procedure, ended up in the emergency room an hour later, spent the week in the cardiac wing and then lost his job while he was in the hospital. And so can you see, or my background and experience as an executive in the software industry, can't you see
Right.
how as each of us, the reason I say all that is never to impress anybody, it's to impress upon anybody who's listening and watching the podcast that your stories, your everything about you, the
Oh,
way that
for
God
sure.
has made you is it's all there to reach the audience that's waiting for you. I
Correct.
like to say it this way that there's literally and maybe figuratively 100%, maybe even literally people that are dying to hear you, to show up in your authentic self, just be you and bring your wholeness, yourself, your person that you are right now today to the marketplace to be able to help somebody else that's maybe a couple of years or 5 years behind you. Like,
Behind. Yeah. And they resonate with your story. They resonate with
yes.
your journey. And that's when it clicks.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've each got our work to do and our assignments. And I'm certainly, I've stepped into mine and yeah, trusting God to reach the people that He's put in my path to reach.
Yeah, yeah, that's all. Okay. So let's talk about you and I talked about this in our pre-show. Let's talk about connecting with the people that you're called to reach. Like Dr. Diane, what you shared some really interesting perspectives on that with me. I'd love to hear more about connecting with the people that you're called to reach. All of us, like the plural you for all of us.
Right. So if I can talk about it from my
Yeah.
reference point of being a health professional and former academic, I have found that in the space, there's so much of, if I can call it pretense,
Oh.
people study for a long time. You've
Mm.
got these titles, you've got a successful job, you're earning well, and it's a facade for those who behind the scenes are feeling like something's missing, but
Oh.
they are too embarrassed to speak about it or to admit that actually this is not exactly the way I envisage my professional life. This is not hitting the spot for me.
Yeah.
I want my life to look this way. And they almost feel like they will be judged for acknowledging that publicly. So, with that kind of insight, I have really had to pull out my courage and learn to be vulnerable and tell my
Mm.
own stories authentically. That while on paper I'm this accomplished academic, and
Mhm.
you can read wonderful articles about Dr. Diane, but I've walked a journey where I've had to face some demons, some giants, some
Yeah.
whatever those insecurities, imposter syndrome, feeling like I'm not good enough or whatever. And so I live from a place of authenticity. I tell my stories and I try to reach my
Mhm.
clients from a place of authenticity. And I believe that by doing so, those who have, for lack of a better term, been suffering in silence will
Mm.
then find the courage to step up and say, hey, actually, I can relate to that. And I want to find my true north, find the path that's going to give me professional fulfillment. So that's how I've approached my work, Anita.
I love that. I love
Mm.
that because especially in the online space, the online world, we hear a lot of, hey, look at my Instagram story. Like, I'm
Yep.
amazing. Everything's all put together. I made $1 million overnight. And while I don't knock any of those things, like all of those
Mhm.
things can happen, I probably one of the reasons why you and I resonated with one another, why we connected in the first place, is just because we love to be able to show up and say, life is amazing, but sometimes it's not. And
That's
so
right.
let's talk about that, because
Mhm.
that I have found more breakthrough and more just everything, more like joy and all, by just showing up and being me. There are often times where I was like, I'm super like task driven, very logical. My mind is logical. So many times my logical mind says, I don't exactly fully understand imposter syndrome because I don't even know how to show up and not just be me. But
You, yeah.
that's been a journey that I've gone through of nope, just going to tell that story no matter what. And if everybody likes it, awesome. If they don't, okay too. I don't know.
Oh, I've had those moments for sure where I'll record an episode and talk about an incident in my life or a time when I struggled. And after I release it, it's like, oh, what will people think? Will they judge me? Will they stop listening? Because I'm not this perfect human being, but it's about drawing out the lessons from our life experiences and how we overcame those difficult times and sharing that it encourages, as you say, people who are 5 years behind us that, okay, there are some tools that I can use, and let me learn from Dr. Diane, let me learn from Anita, and how can I draw from her experience to shorten the learning curve for me.
Yeah, so fabulous.
Mm.
I don't know why I feel like I'll just put a little like asterisk around there. What you share is definitely important. What you share, how you share it. We're not talking about, neither Dr. Diane nor myself are talking about sharing all of our dirty laundry, but we are
Right.
authentically sharing the pieces of our story that help someone else. So it's all from, I can assume for you, but you can confirm. It's always from a place of, let me pull back the curtain and show you the areas that have been a challenge for me in my business or in
Mhm.
my life so that I can help somebody else.
Oh,
So and then like for me in my story, when it includes other people like my husband, running that by them ahead of time. Hey, I respect
yeah.
you and I
Mhm.
respect you first and foremost before anybody else. Is it okay with you that I share these things? So can you hear, for our listeners today, can you hear that my heart is share, serve and share, but out of respect for everybody, out of respect for my household and everybody that's
Right.
listening. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when we share from a place of sincerity,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, out of respect, if anybody else is involved in the story, and people will they will even hear and feel that authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not about window dressing and trying to sensationalize anything, but it's, hey, as you say, life is not always perfect. It may seem perfect to people. Oh, you've got this. You're so accomplished. You got A, B, C, or D. But I walked a hard road. I had
Yeah.
to go through some things. And these are the things I went through. And this is how I overcame. And this is why I can help you on your journey, because
Mm-hmm.
these are some of the very real challenges you will encounter when you choose to walk this path.
Mm.
And yeah, so I think just respect, authenticity, sincerity, and it really comes across when you do. And as you say, with discretion. You're not going to share all the details of your lives, but pick out the pieces that other people have possibly encountered or struggling with, and how your experience and the lessons you've learned can help them.
I love that. I love that. Okay, let's transition a little bit, Dr. Diane, about okay, so now we're maybe, well, I'm just going to paint a hypothetical stage. We've come from a corporate career. We have what I call a God-sized idea inside of us to start to transition over to entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And we start getting out on social media, maybe create a podcast or something like that. And we start sharing our story and resonating. But then we want to also connect with other people. You and I had chatted before we started about networking to connect. I'm going to look at my notes. Networking to connect in order to grow. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I loved your perspective on, I guess maybe I think old school networking events. Man, I didn't want to have any personally, like I did not want to have
Me
anything
too.
to do with those networking events that I picture that maybe like in my dad's generation they did, where it was like, I don't know, like salesy and sleazy and yucky and it makes you feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable. But we talked about the opposite of that. So maybe describe for our audience, what is networking to be able to connect and grow? What does that look like for you? And how do you help people understand what we're talking about today and be able to break into those environments where they might be a little bit fearful or have some trepidation in their hearts right now?
Sure. So two things for me, Anita. I realized even though I knew this was my next assignment and the work I needed to do in this phase of my life, I also knew that I didn't have all the answers. I didn't have all the know-how. And if I wanted to do it well, I needed to connect with people who could, one, inspire me to keep going, even though I'm traveling a path that I haven't traveled before. I don't have the blueprint. So, how can I be inspired and learn from others who are possibly on the same journey, a little bit ahead of me? So, that's the networking to connecting with people who's going to help support the momentum in your business. And then those people stretch you. You're learning all the time. And so you're connecting because you need some sort of support to say, hey, you can do this. Okay, I've done it. But then you get stretched to grow. You learn, oh, they're doing this in their business, and they'll share tools that worked for them or didn't work. So you can avoid those pitfalls. And that's when you grow. But it starts again with you admitting to yourself that you don't necessarily have all the answers, tools, and resources. So you need to link up with people around you. That's the networking to connect, who can then stretch you to the next level and help you to grow. So that's my philosophy or my theory around if you want to achieve a big vision, you can't do it alone. You
Ooh.
have to find people around you, whether it's a network, a community, a coach who's going to support you in that sort of early infancy stages of getting this new baby out into the world,
Mhm.
and then stretching you in terms of growing it to its full potential.
Oh, I love that. Haven't you noticed too, like when we come from maybe an employee mindset, or in your case, like academic mindset, it's a very different way to think when you get into the entrepreneurial world. Like we use
For
different
sure.
buzzwords. We talk almost like a kind of a totally different language. And then the other thing, so in the context of connecting with other people, for those that are listening, stay with me as I walk through this little path, this thread that I have going in my mind right now, which is it's a slightly different mindset, or maybe even a big mindset shift when you go from like employee mindset to entrepreneur
Oh, for
mindset. The
sure.
way that you think as an employee, I thought, here's an example. As an employee, I thought that job security meant that I just stayed with this one employer for
Yeah.
whatever, however many years, and that my income coming from one source was the most secure thing I can do. As an entrepreneur, I think that's actually the riskiest thing that I can do if my
Sure.
all of my income is coming from one source. So see how that's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like
It's a mindset shift for sure.
totally. So the other thing, because we as entrepreneurs, we not only need a shift in our mindset, but we talk differently. But the other thing is getting around other people that can, like what we call in our communities, draw out the gold in one another. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily everybody in your life, even the people that you live with, are going to understand the entrepreneurial journey.
Sure.
They don't when I first started out, I'd been super successful in the corporate world, stepped out, retired early, homeschooled our kids, and then stepped back in about 6-ish years ago, 6.5 years ago. And initially, when I'm doing all this work, and my husband's, okay, babe, how's it going? What's happening? Where's the money coming? And supporting me along the way. But we always say, if there's no money coming in, it's a hobby,
Sorry,
it's not a
Anita.
business. But then being around people who can encourage me and talk to me, and like you said,
Oh,
like,
sure.
give me all the peace, just help me take my next step. I don't whatever that looks like. It's like a different ball game altogether. You step into an alternate universe, if you will. And then I found, like, sometimes groups I would get in. First group I got in, I had an Amazon business, was amazing, all about Amazon scaling and growing. It was the $1 million overnight messaging, which is, it
Mhm.
can totally happen, but around the wholesale and Amazon business. But I had a hard time being a believer and a follower of Jesus, connecting with anybody else who was Christian. I had a hard time finding that. And then I stepped into another community, more entrepreneur minded, around coaching and consulting, more my background, a little bit more around a Christian background, more, and that helped. Going from one group to the next over time, that really helped. And then now being in communities where we openly say, God, it's all about you. We're going to
Yeah.
give you all the
Yeah.
glory along the way.
Yeah.
Like more authentic in our belief system and who we are as sons and daughters of the Most High King, and doing the things, what you call like the purpose-driven work that he's called us to, and
Mm.
serving the clients that are assigned to us. Each step of the journey, as I've grown and I've scaled my business, like I've just needed different groups along the way to help and support me. So like, maybe talk to me, what's been your journey a little bit on that note?
For sure, there definitely are shifts in what kind of support, what networks you need to tap into as you evolve.
Yeah.
Your need for support and the nature of support you need will evolve. And so constantly reflecting as to whether you're still getting what you need in the networks and spaces you are at, or whether you need to up level that or shift it. You need something else. So absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Dr. Diane, as we start to wrap up our time together here, do you have any other thoughts that relate to the conversations that we've been having? And if not, then we can go to that next step. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, now I think this has been a fantastic conversation, so aligned, Anita, with the work that you do.
Yeah.
And just to encourage the listeners that if you've had something on your heart and you know that you're being called to next level growth, or to pivot into something that God has laid on your heart, but you don't have the full know-how, or you feel you've tried on your own and not necessarily gotten the success you want, don't be afraid to reach out. In fact, the value is in picking up your hand and admitting that I can't do this alone. I need support from someone who's walked the journey, who can help me, who can encourage me when I'm feeling low. And that is going to fast track your journey to accomplishing the dreams and goals that you have for yourself. So that would be my encouragement to the audience, is if you find yourself in that space, reach out to the people, the resources, the tools that are out there to help you accomplish your God-given dreams.
Oh, I love that. I always ask the question in a slightly different way of help somebody just to take their next one step.
Oh,
And
yes.
you nailed it. You totally nailed it, Dr. Diane. Awesome. So
Yeah.
wonderful. So
You're
Dr. Diane,
welcome.
as we're wrapping up here, how can people connect with you more? Like I loved hearing your story today, and you've given us practical and tactical advice, as well as just spiritual guidance along the way. Like, how can people connect with you and go a little bit deeper if they'd like to?
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Anita. So yeah, my podcast is Life Beyond Clinical Practice. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or any other streaming platforms where podcasts can be heard. I have an Instagram page, Life Beyond Clinical Practice, as well, and a website by the same name, www.lifebeyondclinicalpractice, and you can see what sort of services and resources I have available. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with your audience. And if any of them are healthcare professionals wanting to really scale their impact in the healthcare field or even outside, they're welcome to reach out to me.
Ah, love it. I just want to honor you and say the work that you're doing, Dr. Diane, is so incredibly important. I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad that you're showing up and doing the work that God's called you to do. You're making a difference in the lives of people listening to your podcast and your clients that are coming into your sphere right now. So thank you so much for just being with us today and just showing up and being authentically you in the way that God has made you. We really appreciate just your time today and what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Anita. I really appreciate your time as well, and bless you for the work that you continue to do. May you touch many more lives.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here today.